Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Culture Roundtable, brought to you by Culture and Sports. At the Culture Roundtable, we talk about how leadership and organizational culture impact things like organizational success, team and athlete performance, and the short and long term mental, physical, and emotional health of athletes. Today, we have three incredible panelists to join us. We have Joe Morissette, who's the CEO of Speed Skating Canada. We have Aron McGuire, who is the CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton. And we have Matt Farrell, who is the CEO of US Figure Skating. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Very good. Thank you for
All
asking.
right, great. Joe, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to your current role at Speed Skating Canada?
Sure. Yeah, I'll say this. I was a terrible university football player and wanted to stay involved in sport. So had to go either going sport medical or sport administration, went the administration side. So I worked for 9 years with a Canadian inter-university sport, which is the NC2A of Canada. Then moved on to a couple of other opportunities. I was the CEO of Badminton Canada, Triathlon Canada. And then in 2003 became the CEO of Speed Skating Canada, and it was an opportunity that I could not pass up because we are Speed Skating Canada's Canada's most successful Olympics sport and organization. We've won more medals both summer and winter than any other sport. And yeah, when someone offers you the proverbial keys to that type of organization, you have to take it. So very proud to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. And obviously, Aaron was the one who kind of roped you into this. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your road to become the CEO of US Figure Skating?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm Matt Farrell, CEO of US Figure Skating. I've been in this role just a few days shy of a year, and so long time career in sports. Most of that in the Olympic world, a combination of the USOPC, about 13 years as the CMO with USA Swimming. And then a little diversion to the golf world in my own consulting business. But everything I've done career-wise has been in sports, all on the business side of it. And I'll probably steal Joe's comment when I had an opportunity to answer the bell on U.S. figure skating. It's just one of those things you do not you run toward it, not away from it, type opportunities, and it couldn't be better.
Thank you, Matt. And Aaron, you've done a few things with Culture and Sports now, Culture and Sports podcast and our annual leadership summit, I believe. Can you please share your journey to USA Bobsled and Skeleton via USA Track and Field, correct?
Yeah, Jeremy, great to be back. Thanks again for organizing these conversations. I think they're really beneficial not only for those that are tuning in, but also for us as well. I love learning about other sports and what other countries are doing here. So thanks for having us. Yeah, you mentioned USA Track and Field that actually started off as a track and field athlete, decathlete in Ohio. Went from being a decathlete into the sport of bobsled. So competed for the U.S. team for about 3 seasons. Missed the Olympic team, but had a chance to represent the USA at World Cup and World Championship events in Italy, Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, Canada, and the United States. And so that really energized me and kind of changed my path to be full-time involved in sports and specifically Olympic and Paralympic sport. And so from being an athlete, as you mentioned, I was actually living in Indianapolis, where the headquarters of USA Track and Field is based. Applied for a role, was with USA Track and Field for about 7 years. An opportunity opened up in Colorado Springs, overseeing the Olympic and Paralympic training centers, both here in the Springs, where I am now, and Lake Placid, working with the USOPC. And then about 6 years ago, this role opened up as CEO of USA Bobsled and Skeleton. So I couldn't think of a better way to go from being an athlete to full circle, taking the experiences that I've had, the conversations I've had, and the connections I've made to back to the NGB to put it in the best position possible to continue to support athletes.
Thank you for sharing that, Aaron. So before we started letting all the attendees into this webinar, we were talking about how the Olympic cycle has ended for winter sports and is quickly restarted. And it was all happening at once. The Olympic Games, World Championships, and all of a sudden, budgeting, planning, new fiscal years, all sorts of things are happening in winter sports. And I wanted to start um, with you, Matt. Let's talk about organization's goals. What are your current organizational goals, and how did you and U.S. figure skating actually arrive at those goals?
Oh, it's a great question and good timing. There's a little bit of an internal joke here that there was like a between a Friday and a Monday of in April that we're like, okay, the off season's over. Now we're back. And so the timing that I came on, it just couldn't have been better of just 9 months leading into Milan, and then coming out of that and building our strategic plan. And I know that that is a pretty boring term to many. That's a pretty fun term for me. And so we went through that process and have it finalized. And really where we settled was kind of really these three core tenets, or the kind of the three legs of the triangle, that were community growth, competitive excellence, and commercial success. And and yes, there's the alliteration of it, but the unique thing about an NGB is those three are a continuous cycle. And I just want to kind of really pound those three core pillars into everybody's mind in US figure skating. As the Olympics is the sizzle, but the steak is really that community piece, and 200,000 plus people on skates are learning to skate. And that continuous cycle of, you don't have an Alyssa Liu unless your learn to skate program is good, and the cycle of those. So that's where we settled, and then built out the strategy and the whole plan around those three core pillars.
What about you, Joe and Aaron? What are your organization's goals, and how did you all arrive at those?
So overarchingly, we've settled on a goal that we want to be the number one skating nation by the 2034 games in Salt Lake City. That's a aspirational goal. In our sport, the Dutch, it's like their speed skating is their national sport, and there's a substantial gap between us, who finished second overall in the medals between short track and long track, and the Dutch where they finished overall. But we believe that we can close that gap. But to Matt's point, like, this is a systemic change that we need to do, and it's about, we can set our goals to be number one games, but this, we want to set something that's systemically achieving success year after year. So it has to be a foundational change, or a foundational approach that we make, right down to our Learn to Skate program, getting more kids on skates, more kids on speed skates, and then really strengthening sort of the athlete development pathway. We're in the similar phase right yet. We're still in the strategic planning part of setting up for the next squad, but that's our basic our overall arching goal. But again, you might say it's aspirational. The Dutch are so strong, but we feel that this is a goal that's attainable. And then, there's a lot of other pieces that need to fill in to make that all happen, but it's an exciting vision to have. So I think that's where we are right now in our sort of strategy, as setting a vision and setting ambitious goals.
It's great to hear from both of y'all, and I could probably relate to this, but I've gotten a lot of people that have come to me and said, "Oh, the games are over. Are you on vacation? Are you resting now? Are you getting recovery?" And I'll tell you that hasn't started yet. I'm waiting for that vacation and that downtime. But on my flight over to Italy, I was answering questions on email and drafting papers on what we're going to be doing for the next 4 years. And so it's not there's not a end and a start. It's just continuous, as you all know. But there's key times within that quad that are they're really critical. And this is the 6 months, the 9 months right after the games are often the most critical for what we do over the next 4 years and how we set ourselves up for success in 2030, 2034, and then every year in between. And so, Matt mentioned strategic plan and he said it's maybe not the most exciting, but I think it's really important. And I'm sure both these guys do as well. And for us, we're wrapping up a strategic plan. And a lot of folks when they think about sports, Olympics or Paralympics, they think they have very focused thoughts on athletes and coaches. And we're in the business of running organizations, and it's not just about coaches and athletes. And we're looking at budgets, we're looking at marketing, we're looking at promotions and communications and compliance and policies and everything in between. And so we actually just finished up our strategic plan. We're in the process of building out our strategic plan for the next 4 years. And for me, I think that plan is crucial for the organization. One is it really defines what we're going to be focused in on and what are the areas of growth. We have a vision of where we are today and where we want to be in a year from now or in 4 years from now. And that strategic plan really creates the roadmap to achieve that. Um, it also helps define what we're not going to do. There's always a lot of great ideas. I mean, there's more ideas than any of us have the bandwidth to do, or the budgets to do. And so a lot of times an organization gets sidetracked on something shiny and fun that's great right now, spend a lot of time going down that path, but then we're going to have to give up something for that. So that strategic plan really helps create that focus. And for me, I think the last thing that's really crucial is it helps create buy-in. For us, we'll have our athletes involved in crafting that strategic plan. We'll have our coaches, our staff members, our board members, volunteers, and we'll have for us, we've got key stakeholders at the two tracks in the United States, Lake Placid and Park City. And so if everybody contributes to that strategic plan, they all have great ideas. Now, maybe not all their ideas might make it into that final draft, but something will. And by contributing to it, there's a sense of we want to make sure that this plan is successful. And so that creates, that helps us avoid naysayers or saying, "Oh, if you guys would have asked me, I would have said you do this, this, and this." So it helps create buy-in to ultimately lead to success. And then we always attach, strong metrics and goals with each of the areas of focus within that strategic plan, so we can objectively measure how we're doing within the overall quad.
Aaron, let me ask you a question. You spoke a little bit heavily on stakeholders. Can you please expand a little bit about the different types of groups of stakeholders that you have? And then also, if you have a you know, an athlete or maybe even potentially a youth athlete. I know there's not a lot in bobsled and skeleton, but you're saying that what their idea is may actually make it into a strategic plan. Can you kind of explain why stakeholders' thoughts are extraordinarily important, and how does a new athlete or an athlete that's only been around for a few seasons actually talk to someone and their focus and what they have identified may actually make it into the strategic plan and the overall organization's goals for USA Bobsled and Skeleton?
Yeah, and I think all of us have a lot of stakeholders. We have committees, we've got volunteers, we've got the athletes, and I'd say unlike Joe and Matt, one of our goals is not necessarily to grow our membership, and that's because we have limited tracks, limited facilities, and limited equipment, and so we know that we're always going to be a small niche sport. So a lot of our areas of focus and goals aren't necessarily set on membership growth. But we do recognize that every member who's part of the organization has an extremely, important voice to what we're doing. And so when we do the strategic plan, we want to hear from everybody. And part of that is to hear consistent themes. That's always going to be important. So when we have consistent themes that we know, that's going to be high up on that priority list. but we also don't want to miss anything. We all have blinders on or areas that we may not necessarily be thinking about. And so for our process within the strategic plan, we take it in kind of three phases. The first phase is to send out a survey to every member within the organization. So if you're a member of USA Bobsled and Skeleton, we want to hear from you, and we send out a survey that has very specific questions, but then some very open-ended questions to get their perspectives. The next step is to take a portion of that of our membership and make sure that we have good representation within, athletes, coaches, volunteers, board members, and have a virtual meeting to make sure that we close kind of the communication gap and report back out to say, here's what we received in the survey. Is this what you guys are saying? Is this the priorities? These are priorities that you all see as well. And are we missing anything? And let's drill down a little bit more in these two or three topics. And then the final step will ultimately be an in-person uh, discussion with, again, a smaller segment of each of those stakeholders or constituent groups to really start to get down into details. And then ultimately, we're working with a facilitator because it's great to have an outside perspective. They will take all the data that we've collected, all the comments we've collected, and put it into a plan that's not this thick, but this thick, something that we can actually refer back to regularly and refer back to at least annually with our board and our athletes to say, here's what we said we're going to do, and here's where we're tracking on each of those target areas.
And
Yeah,
Matt,
I would say very
how?
similar,
Oh, sorry.
Joe, or Jeremy, excuse me. Very similar. And I think agree with everything that Aaron said. There's a psychological piece, in my opinion, that I, as a stakeholder, I just want to see that my idea made the whiteboard, so to speak. Well, most times, I can live with the fact that maybe my idea didn't make the final plan, but if I saw it captured on the whiteboard, I feel heard and it was part of the discussion. And everything Aaron just went through of committees and town halls and all is all part of that of just making sure that those voices are captured. And then you have to make the tough decisions of what's in, what's out.
Similar to Matt and Aaron, we're starting this process as well. Similar process, a lot of engagement. In Canada, we're slightly different because we have what we call provincial territorial organizations, like regional organizations, and then we have in our sport 170 clubs. So we're small enough that we can actually, I think, have that meaningful engagement at the level, like we're a club operator who might be in a remote part of Quebec, might not really see the role of the organization in the development of sport, but can actually participate in a meaningful way in giving their thought how we could be more supportive around the growth of the sport, strengthening the system, finding better alignment. One of our key terminologies that we keep talking is alignment because we're sort of fragmented across the country with all these regional centers, regional training, regional centers, and then regional training centers. Is how do you bring everyone to the table and have that common goal and have that common practice so that there's efficiencies within the system. And it does start with the plan. If everybody has an opportunity to provide their feedback, insight, thoughts, and into that process, then you're getting buy-in at an earlier stage. And like Matt said, you might see your idea on the whiteboard, but it might not make it through to the final version. But that engagement piece is so important when you have, member organizations and a wide assortment of stakeholders who love your sport, want to be involved in your sport, but also and take ownership of aspects of the sport, but engaging with them is absolutely key.
Joe, since you're just speaking, let's
Yep.
transition a little bit into what success looks like within your organization and within the sport of speed skating in Canada.
Well, I talked about the aspirational goal that we have, but I don't want to talk about just medals. I think one of our one of the proudest things that I have is seeing success of our athletes post-career. And I think we are trying very hard at Speed Skating Canada and most sports in Canada to ensure that there's a we rebalance the competitive environment so that athletes really have an opportunity to pursue education so that when they come out of their career or they've decided this is their career's reached an end, they have options that they're not sort of starting from scratch. The challenge for an athlete right now well, I imagine everywhere right now of all the retired Olympians is they've put their lives on hold to pursue their passion and their sport and got a lot of respect for that. So as an organization, I want to make sure that when they go into their first corporate interview and maybe they might be 30 years old and everybody they're competing against is just out of university, but that they have the ability to be successful quickly. So I think we're really proud over the last few years how SS Speed Skating Canada has changed our sort of approach to training, the training environment to provide greater flexibility for our athletes to be successful post-career. We measure success. We do sort of an internal employee review every 2 years to make sure our employees are happy. We do a similar review with all of our sort of internal stakeholders, these regional centers and regions, to make sure that they're content as members of our federation. Because I think, knowing there's a problem, I think is the first thing, the first step in being able to deal with them. And through these various stakeholder conversations, athlete town halls, staff 360s, we've been able to sort of figure out where there might be pinch points of friction, and address them in a more timely way before they start to really become a flare up in the organization that we need to you know throw a lot of resources at to address. If you can, for lack of better words, you know, put those issues to rest at an early stage and have early interventions, and you're not going to be dealing with major challenges, come Olympic Games, or from a high performance perspective, or friction in your training centers with athletes, between athletes, coaches, or athletes and athletes. And it's a valuable tool, or these are valuable tools in understanding where we are from stakeholder satisfaction, and I include my employees in that one as well.
Joe, I like what you said in terms of the success goes beyond the medals. And you
Yeah.
think back at one point, in the Olympic movement, for most countries, success was pretty binary. Did you hit your medal target or did you not? And it was either successful or not. And so I'd say that broadly speaking, national federations and national governing bodies have become more sophisticated in what success looks like. And it goes beyond just the medals. And while
Mhm.
medals is often a reflection of the support that we can provide to athletes, I think many of us, including us, think about what's the impact of that experience of an athlete during the duration of their time in the sport. And that duration could be, for figure skating and speed skating, it could be 25 years from when they start. It could be, for us, we have some athletes that come out and try out the sport, they make a team and they're gone in 1 year. And so, and it also, no matter what level they get to, whether they're part of a development team, part of the Olympic team, or they're Olympic gold medalists, we want to make sure that every athlete that comes through our program can look back at it and say, yep, my time in that sport helped me become a better leader within my community, a better, better family member, better within, a better, stronger leader within my organization. And so their experience provides them potentially a skill set or an experience that allows them to have a very positive impact within their family, their friends, their community, their careers.
Yeah, these
And I,
these guys are nailing it. NGBs and other sports organizations really developed a well-earned reputation of being a bit of an assembly line. Of athlete comes through, they perform, we say thank you for your gold medal. Next, and I would say, and not just U.S. figure skating, but sports and Olympic sports in particular, I think over call it the last decade, have become much more focused on holistic wellness, culture of organization. And in my early years in sports, that would have never been on the. Uh, I think all of us come to work each day being unapologetic about wanting to win, and that's something that is important and will always be part of our culture, and I think always should be. But I do think sports in general has taken a little bit of a step back and say, okay, let's look at the person, let's look at the people, let's look at the culture of what we're trying to build. And I don't know that any of us are certainly not figure skating ready to plant the mission accomplished flag on that, but it's a very intentional part of our thought process these days.
Yeah,
So
and
let
to your,
me,
oh,
oh,
go
go ahead.
ahead.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to close the loop on that one. I think uh, the other piece, it reflects back to Matt's, three pillars of his strategic plan is, the commercialization piece as well.
You have to do that when you say
Yeah.
it.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. You know, we have, and I'm sure Matt and Aaron would agree, like, former Olympians, high performance athletes, when they get out, they're A-type personality. When they get out into the community, they often do have a lot of success. And, by making sure that an athlete has a positive experience, and when they come out of there, that they might become, alumni, they might become a board member, they might want to give back in various ways. One of our biggest success stories over the last 2 years is a new partnership with a carbon capture company, and the fact that it was an alumni. Someone who just missed going to the 88 games who came forward and said, I would like to invest in SSC. I have a passion around it. I had a great experience. And I want to support an organization that gave me this great experience, that this leg up in life in terms of, structure, discipline, and enjoyment of this of sport, and give back to it and make sure it's strengthened. So, when you talk about, how culture, the aspect of the culture being circular, or the Matt's plan being sort of circular and feeding into each other, having a great culture, having people come out of your sport with really positive experience, with a positive attitude around the federation, is just reinforcing to that organization's long-term success.
And I wanted to ask a further question about success. And I think I already know Aaron's answer to this, but we'll start off with you, Joe.
Sure thing.
Is what defines success better for your organization? 10 new youth athletes introduced to the sport or a gold medal at the Olympics?
Uh,
I'm glad you're first.
yeah, me too. Um, it depends on the stakeholder I'm talking to, really. I think, you know, in Canada, we have a unique way of funding, a different way of funding sport. It's a lot through the federal government. One of our key metrics is Olympic success. So, that is a self-reinforcing, so those Olympic successes that we had, and we are successful. We won 10 of Canada's 21 medals at the last games. We are the best, strongest sport overall for Canada at those games. So from our stakeholder perspective, the ones who are, writing the check to help support our high performance programs, the medal is the performance piece. I would love to, I would love to see that also reinforce, that success reinforce, and bring in more participants into the sport, because they see positive role models, men and women, Canadians on the podium being successful, and being part of that. So at a grassroots level, at my regional training centers and those regional areas, that the 10 participants are probably the more important piece, but I think the two are not sort of, in silos from each other. It's really again, it's a reinforcing cycle of, Olympic success helps bring more athletes, visibility to the sport, more athletes to try the sport post games, and yeah, we want to keep that cycle going.
Yeah, they're hard to separate. It's a dodge of the question a little bit, Jeremy, but they're hard to separate. It's like ask a Major League Baseball team what's more important, winning or ticket sales, and you're like, you know, kind of like picking your favorite child. You just can't do it. So
Some days you can, though.
sometimes,
Hey, I'll jump in there. I'll take the medal. We don't have youth athletes, so I'll take the medal. I
oh,
think
you take
Okay.
the Aaron was waiting for that. That's
no,
great.
no, but that yeah, I mean you're absolutely right. I think participation and exposing people and athletes to a sport is critically important. Um, so is getting medals. I mean, they're all tied. You earn a medal means you get new viewers, you get people's attention. That draws in more participants, and you get more participants, and it drives more medals. And so it's cyclical, and they're closely tied together.
Aaron, what are some of the roadblocks that may hinder or slow down reaching success for your organization, the coaches, and the athletes, and also other stakeholders?
Yeah, there's being kind of a non, I mean, look, all of our sports are kind of non-mainstream. Figure skating, certainly gets a lot of attention in the games. Speed skating does, and people enjoy watching bobsled and skeleton. So it is great during games time that people tune in and get excited about our sports. And so, I mean, raising awareness and keeping engagement from games to games, I think, is always a challenge for all of us. And we're getting better with leveraging social media because while we may not have competitions on TV every weekend, we've got social media and we've got updates of what the athletes are doing behind the scenes, the training, the stories of who they are. For us, one of our challenges is they wear helmets and they're on the screen. They're racing for a minute at a time, so it's really hard to kind of care about somebody when you really don't know who they are. And so wearing a helmet and having limited time to talk and showcase who you are, that's a challenge. And so that's where we've been able to leverage social media to really dig down into the stories of who the athletes are and how they got into the sport. And for us, we're a bit unique because most athletes in bobsled and skeleton don't start out being a bobsled or skeleton athlete. They come from other sports. They played football, they played soccer, they ran track and field, and they found the sport of bobsled and skeleton later on in life. And so telling those stories, exposing people to those realities of the sport, because there's just an assumption that you started bobsledding when you're 5 years old. Most people do; they just don't realize it. When you go sledding at 5, it's that experience of bobsledding. You going down a hill, you get going a little too fast, and you get that adrenaline going. And that's the same experience that you have when you compete in the sport there. So it's tying the sport, it's tying the athletes, and back to an experience that many of us had as a young kid. But then it's providing an opportunity for people to care about the team, can care about the athletes, and if you can do that, then when we are on TV, when we do have races, people tune in and they want to see the results and see how the individuals that they've gotten to know how they did.
If you've ever gone through a strategic planning exercise recently, uh, all of your faults are keenly pointed out to you during that process. But we, I mean, we probably have a couple that raise to the level of one is at that youth level conversion. I would say we as a sport do a great job of getting kids, adults to try to learn to skate, but we have a massive challenge of what happens next and presenting and offering the different options of skating, of whether you want to be the next Alyssa Liu or you want to join a synchronized skating team because your friends are on it. That's a major pain point for us of how do we intercept that moment of learn to skate to presenting options. And the other big one for us is really unique to figure skating is we live in just a really, really confusing and complex world of music rights. And how do we take those performances and not just at the Olympic level, but at the grassroots level of I want to skate to Lady Gaga and have it on Instagram. Um, and so that is that is a thread you pull on and you just realize how complicated it is, but it's so uniquely tied to our sport that that's a confusing landscape that we have to solve better than we have it today.
From our side, I think what we're dealing with in Canada is an aging infrastructure issue right now.
Yeah.
The like our two major training centers for short track and long track are in Olympic venues. One was built in for the 88 games and one was built for the 76 games in Montreal. So we're talking venues that date back, well, one dates back to the 60s. And how do you work with your partners, work for those facility operators, the facility owners, or talk about re renewals of those venues? I mean, and you're not small requests. Like these are, there's a plan to do some work on the Calgary Olympic Oval, and it's a $60 million project. That's multiple years of my budget, and I can't shovel that money into that one project. So how do you work with, the various, municipal, the
Mm.
actual venue owner, municipal government, local, like state government, and even federal government around what are the opportunities to work that? And you need to be work shoulder to shoulder with those partners to make sure that those stakeholders or those funding partners for that renovation or renewal, venue renewal, understand the importance of the sport, and understand the importance of that venue to the community in terms of, value add in terms of providing opportunities for the local community to participate, but also the revenue we bring in when we host major international events like World Championships in those venues. I think the other piece that's for us in Canada, it's a bit challenging is that we become very centralized in two major centers, and that's Calgary and Montreal. And how do we get the sport out to the greater community in terms of that top level competition? So we've worked closely with the city of Vancouver, and we're bringing a ISU World Tour event into that venue. Again, working with that venue to make some major renovations um, so that it can accommodate short track, but it does allow us to bring, visibility to our sport in, Canada's second largest city, major center of business operations. So there's the corporate angle as well. And it does really get our sport out there and build a little resiliency in terms of options and where we might need to go if we do lose venues because of age or they actually have to close temporarily for those renovations. So big focus right now on for us is sort of, understanding how we can be a good partner with those venue operators to make sure that um, we're telling a really good story and a compelling story around why investment in sport infrastructure here in Canada is important.
Now, Joe, would you say that sport infrastructure is your biggest focus for the next 4 years, or would it be something else?
Oh, I think for our organization, decisions were made. It is a big focus. I'll address that part of the question. It is a big focus because we know that Calgary Oval, which is our primary training center for long track speed skating, is going to close at some point, whether due to systems failures and in terms of the ice plant or renovations. I'm fingers crossed, everything's crossed. Really, it's that it's for renovations. So, planning in and around that, contingency planning and around that closure is going to be key. Um, I think the biggest piece though for us, and I think Matt touched on it a little bit, and so did Aaron, is like where are the next generation of Olympians coming? Like right now, we are trying to determine, like our goal again is to be the number one nation in 34 in terms of speed skating. Where are those athletes coming from? What is the system that they're operating in? Decisions in the past by, previous boards, previous leaders and the role has sort of much sacrificed that what we call our next gen cohort to ensure Olympic success. Most of our Olympic medalists were above the age of 30 at these past games. So they're not going to race in 30 and 2030 or 2034 for sure. So where is that next generation? Where is that next cohort coming from? How do we do effective talent ID and use the limited resources we have to invest appropriately into athletes to make sure that we can achieve that goal? I think
What about
that's
for,
going to be our big focus for the
yeah,
next 4 years. Again, with that vision of being number one in
Mhm.
34.
and what about for USA Bobsled and Skeleton, Aaron? What is the biggest focus for the next 4 years?
Jill, before I answer that, Jill, I got a question for you. When you talk about being number one in 34, what does that mean to you? Is that medals alone, or are there more aspects to that?
Oh,
Great question.
that's a great question. Number one in 34 is we have, again, the vision is we have a sustainable system that game after games, we are number one, number two in the medal count at every games. But that means investment has to happen right down at the Learn to Skate program so that we're training that cohort to the community coaches, to the regional organizations that are running the sport to invest into them to make sure that they're strong, so that we continue to be once we build it, it's a sustainable system. So that's been our challenge at Speed Skating Canada is we do well in one games and then we sort of drop off a couple of games later. And so that sustainability, that ability to continuously produce at the highest level is quite important, but it takes that investment, like I said, right at that learn to skate first opportunity too, because we talked about the athlete experience a little bit more at the senior level and how they could feedback, but you want that athlete experience, the first time they're on skates to be an amazing experience and that someone falls in love with the sport from day one and they continue through. We want to be working on this year, we want to be working on athletes. We want to be working on future athletes for 42 games, 46 games. Like that's our horizon. It's a long-term success plan. I think medals is an easy way. It's a good metric for us to use, right? We know we have to close a gap between the Dutch, and it's the Dutch are really strong. They doubled up on our medals, but to have that type of vision, to have that sort of drive, it's something that people can, sink their teeth into, and then when they understand it's systemic investment, and it's a long-term investment, people get excited about that.
Makes sense. That makes sense. So, Jeremy, sorry, what was your question for me?
No, that was a great question you asked, Aaron. So I was very happy about that. What's USA Bobsled and Skeleton's biggest focus for the next 4 years?
Yeah, and we have the same. Obviously, when you host an Olympic Games, you want to be successful, and you want to win, you want to bring home medals, and you have a competitive opportunity and competitive advantage to be successful. And so, we are targeting 2034 as well. Joe, don't tell Canada bobsled and skeleton, but
It's my
we're also
secret.
targeting 34. But we know that 30, we have to be successful in 30. And so, we have very much a growth mindset of we have to, if we want to be better than where we are today, we have to have that incremental growth, that incremental improvement. And I always think about, the phrase, what's the best time to plant a tree? It's 30 years ago. What's the second best time to plant a tree? It's today. And so it's what do we have to do today? And we have to look back over the past years of what we've done and how we've grown as an organization, but we can't let things that we did or didn't do in the past hold us back. And so it is oftentimes forward looking. It's learn from the past, but plan for the future. And so for us, we do have targets on 34, but we know we have to hit certain targets in 30 to achieve our goals in 34. And so it's every year we want to be a little bit better than where we were in the past. And we also know there's some big picture things that we are doing that you can't just do in one year. For us, equipment plays a big role. So designing bobsleds and building bobsleds and working on aerodynamics, you don't do that in just a season. To really get good at that takes 4 years or 8 years. And so we're looking at how do we set ourselves up for success, but then reminding ourselves that 34 isn't the finish line. We're not done. We're not doing a victory lap regardless of what happens. But that's in a lot of ways that's the launch pad for what Joe talked about. 2040, 2050, and how do we capitalize on not only 34 but 28 hosting the games in LA, in the United States and in North America to really grow awareness, raise awareness of Olympic and Paralympic sport, recruit more athletes into the sport, and generate more partners, more long-term partners, because we do know that when we generate more revenue, we can allow that we can take that growth and provide that back into the programs that we have in place to support athletes. And so that allows us to do more. And set ourselves up for the next time that the games return back to Utah, because I know Utah is thinking well beyond 34 as well.
Now, Matt, is 2034 the primary focus for the next 4 years for U.S. figure skating, or are you looking at something else?
I was secretly hoping this wouldn't come back to me because in all serious, yes, and everything that these gentlemen said, and not just success in 34, but success in Utah of what is the legacy of figure skating. And by that I mean I'm convinced, like many other, that Utah is going to host the games 16 or 20 years after 2034, and long after I leave this seat. But just the reason I kind of struggle with the question a little bit, and is NGB jobs are so complex. And if we were just selling widgets, it would be this straightforward answer. If you ask me this morning, it's the technology foundation of our organization. If you asked me a month ago, it would be developing philanthropy. If a month before that is like, what are our media assets? And you don't. Now, the variety is kind of interesting. So I think the Achilles heel to all of that is you losing your focus a little bit. And so I think that's the hard part. It's also the exhilarating part of the job. My every day you walk in is different. And that is probably the single Achilles heel to us of being fragmented, being scattered. And sometimes you feel like your own team's jumping on your back to slow you down. Uh, so I think that's probably the biggest thing to try and solve, of just how do you keep focus. But I'm with these guys of, with some of the other objectives.
Let's transition a little bit into para sport and the Paralympics recently, and I know it wasn't in our title, but it's an integral part of growing sports organizations and also trying to expand not only the reach of the sport but the accessibility of the sport for potential athletes. What are your plans for your para sports for the next few years for your own organizations?
So in Canada, speed skating does not have a strong para component. There are some countries and us as well who are sort of dabbling in it. So we do sledge hockey racing, for lack of better words. So people get that opportunity there. We also have a very big footprint in Special Olympics. I know that's not quite the point you've had, but we're hoping that our international federation sees the opportunity to invest into para sports. I mean, para sports, it's an amazing experience. And I'll step back a couple of years to where I was with when I was the CEO of Badminton Canada. The BWF had brought in para badminton, and it was the first games were in Tokyo, and we had to get a program going from scratch, shortly after 2016 games in Rio and build towards the Tokyo games. And you know, how we found athletes was amazing because within our own existing athlete pool, we found some athletes. And the best story I have is the highlight of my career, and this goes in the culture piece as well, is like being able to call a young athlete who didn't want to be identified as a para athlete initially. Like she was self-conscious of that, to inform her that she'd been selected and qualified for the Tokyo Games. And I remember being on the phone. It was like 6 a.m. where they lived because Canada's a big country. Time difference. And I got the news and I called her right away, and I'm on the phone and she's crying. I'm crying. Her mom's crying as well because it's just a heartfelt story. So a lot of respect for those athletes. I'm hopeful we're going into our Congress with our international federation and with a desire to hopefully push that mandate forward with them. I think there's lots of opportunity to engage in a wide variety of different aspects of individuals with needs, whether it's parasport, Special Olympics, et cetera, for all of our sports.
Yeah, I would just quickly say that, there's kind of two paths to this. One is like, okay, and figure skating is fortunate to be uh, fairly accessible of just getting inclusion and getting anyone who wants to skate involved in the sport. And there's a path for them. It starts there. I think personally, with a longer range goal of Paralympic sport, is quite honestly, I feel like it's a bit of a miss for us globally as a sport to be on a Paralympic program. And for whatever reason, it maybe hasn't had traction in the past or currently, but I think it has to be part of our thinking in the future. Because I just think whether it's uh, athletes with visual impairments or amputees or whatever it might be, there's a path in figure skating, and I hope we collectively and globally as a sport really look at that because I just think it could be a phenomenal addition.
Yeah, for us, we do have Parabob for our para athletes. It is recognized by our international federation, but it's not included in the Paralympic Games. And so the Parabob athletes compete in a number of World Cups, and they have a World Championship at the end of the season. So for us, we're going to continue to push the IPC to include Parabob in the future. On the skeleton side, we're developing and we're growing our
Mm.
paraskeleton athletes as well, and so that's a bit more in development. But we're starting to see more and more athletes that like to go down the track head first at 90 miles an hour. So we want to provide those opportunities.
So let me ask a quick question. Let's talk about integrating AI in your quests for success. What does that look like currently, and where do you envision that in the future, if there is integration of AI in your quest for success?
I can jump on that one. It's more readable emails for me when I hopefully that's what it is. So, I'll say that there's two levels. It's one is kind of your day to day, literally how do you clean something up and using ChatGPT to take some ideas, organizing it and just saving time. And so that's that's great on a day to day. For us, we're getting into utilizing AI for data analytics, and so for every run that we have, we get thousands of points of data on the acceleration of the sled, where it is in the track, how high it is, how far down it is, how many G's of force it's pulling, and if we just relied on our staff, our coaching staff, it just there's an overwhelming number of data points, and we also get the data points of every competitor as well. And so we're partnering with experts that really know how to look at those numbers and crunch numbers and then give us feedback. Using AI to crunch those numbers in a very short amount of time, give us feedback to say, oh, you're Bob said, you're going a little too high in curve three, bring it down a little bit more and you'll be a little bit faster. So, both from, again, the day-to-day business, but how do we provide meaningful feedback to the coaches and athletes to make decisions to help improve performance?
Yeah, as the judged sport guy with two timed sport guys or partial short track, you got short track. I feel a little bit targeted, Jeremy, but quite honestly, it has to be part of our future. And I don't say that from purely an elite level. Yes, there's subjectivity in our sport. We do feel that AI can help remove some of that. We're always going to have an artistry part of our sport, and that's always going to be there. But just as importantly, um, we feel like the future of AI and judging can actually help us run more youth level competitions that's hard to get officials and judges and aging volunteer structure, not just facility structure that Joe said. And so we see it as, yes, a way to help make our sport more understandable, uh, more fair, more objective at the elite level. But it's every bit as much of a youth and a grassroots piece of how do you make it more accessible and the easier to run events that aren't dependent on large technical panels and judges and officials, and make our sport uh, easier to operate. And so we're we're at first inning of really looking at how that might apply, but it absolutely has to be part of our long-term thinking.
Man, I think that's smart. I remember one time someone said to me, AI won't replace people, but people that know how to use AI are going to replace people that don't know how to use it. And I think, same thing goes true with
Great
NGBs, those
phrase.
that kind of don't, not necessarily embrace it, but understand how to utilize it. The NGBs that do are gonna surpass those that don't. And the countries that take it on, understand it, learn to leverage it, are going to surpass the countries that don't.
Yeah, ignore it at your own peril, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Terminator's not too far away if you ignore it.
Well, and it's just the sheer like, and going back to your analytics piece, Aaron, like, the sheer amount of data that we can now gather off an athlete. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that international training center we had coaches with stopwatches timing, doing athlete timing. Now we have a full GPS system installed in the venue, so we could track patterns on our short track team and understand how they're moving through in blocks and where they're losing speed in each turn. Like, these are, when you're in a sport where hundreds of a second are the difference between, being on the podium and not, like, these are advantages that you need to take advantage of. But then what we were struggling with is just the sheer volume of all this information and what is relevant and what is not relevant. So it does act as a bit of filter, but back to your point though, is the human on the end using it is the actual key. If we don't invest in our people to make sure that they can use AI effectively, then how do we know we're not getting false data readings or making false assumptions? So I think we need to proceed cautiously from a data analytics side on our side, but it's really an important piece as well. And we're now trying to use it to actually project athletes forward and see where they might be in a few years based on the data we're having and doing comps to current world championships or past world champions out there. I do agree. Like, mine, oh man, I love my chat GPT when someone sends me like a 3-page email and I'm like, please summarize, because the volume of work that we have, and back to Matt's point, like, some days you're dealing with, infrastructure issues. The next day you're dealing with an HR issue, a sponsor has a challenge. Like, the amount of variation in my workday, means I need to be a sort of a generalist, not an expert at anything. And I sort of recognize that, but using those tools to sort of get down to things, boil down a point, is really quite useful. I think the other piece is with in sort of, again, I will say, like, boutique sports. We're not the football or baseballs of the world. Um, we're funding and how you manage this, being able to augment staff productivity is going to be absolutely key. So for us to continue to grow and strengthen our programs. So as a first step, we're out of the Olympics. We are going to start investing in bringing in some AI experts to help train our staff and get them familiar with the tools. And then, it's a bit of a hit or miss. So you got to try and dabble a little bit into it and see how it might work best for you and your specific role and responsibility. But I think if we're not an early adapter, we're going to be behind the 8 ball compared to our competitors right off the bat.
Yeah, I think it's like
So,
any technology. You can do, there's lots of cool bells and whistles, and it all comes down to impact. And you
Yeah.
take on, you adapt some sort of technology, and you can get some great graphs or charts or layovers, but it's not helping, not having an impact, then it's really a waste of time. And so it
Hmm.
really is taking this broad range of things you can do with AI and understanding what's going to have the biggest
The
impact
impact, yeah.
and help you out the most.
yeah, sorry to cut this conversation, but we are running out of time, unfortunately. And for those in the audience, you submitted dozens of questions, and I apologize we weren't able to ask any of them here. And Joe, I apologize that we didn't really get into funding streams and what has recently happened in Canada. And I'd love to explore that maybe in another cultural roundtable with you. But if each of you could spend about 30 seconds giving a closing statement, what is your focus? What's most important? What are you excited about? What are you concerned about over the next 4-year cycle?
Yeah, I'll just say the growth of the Olympic and Paralympic Games. I mean, we saw several COVID games that, largely went under the radar. People were waking up, seeing results, and from our side, what we've seen with NBC and Comcast, how they package and present it is incredible. And bringing people in like Snoop Dogg to provide a different perspective has been outstanding. And so to see the success of Paris and Italy and see the growth of the Olympic and Paralympic Games is extraordinary, and looking forward to the next 10, 20 years of the games.
No shout out to Flavor Flav, Aaron.
Of course, yeah, yeah. We always, yeah, Flavor Flav. I love working with him and our team, and Jason Kelsey this last year came out as well there. But yeah, and I think that's we've got a lot more celebrities that are tuning in and watching. And when you watch an NBA game, you always pan across that front row of celebrities, and so love to see who's going to be at the events in LA. That's going to be really exciting.
What about you, Joe? Closing statement?
Yeah, I think what gets me up in the morning, and we didn't really touch about it, and it really reflects on the culture of sport concept is, I work with an amazing group of people, high achievers, whether they're the athletes on the ice or my staff, my coaching staff, people in the communities. Like it's in Canada, there's 62 national sports federations, and I'm a leader of one of them. And so I feel very privileged every morning to wake up and lead this organization, lead this sport, and that's a real big motivator. It's a big responsibility, but it's an honor as well and a responsibility. I think what I'm looking forward to is again talking about that systemic goal of being number one in 34, but understanding and communicating that message that this is like a systemic investment that we want to make that is reinforcing and something that we're building for the future that is going to be repeatable year after year. I'd like to think that I'm going to build a system with my team and my staff and our volunteers that is going to be successful games after games and just that's a fun time to be put involved in a sport.
All right, Matt, you have the closing statement.
Well, we U.S. figure skating had lightning in a bottle in Milan, and there's just hard to replicate that. And so now, how do we as a business, as an NGB, convert that into learn to skate and coaching education and training officials and creating new opportunities on the ice and making our organization better? So we're riding a great wave, and now how do we turn that into success for the overall organization and the cycle of the business?